By the end of this video, you will have an idea of what the basics of storytelling in TTRPG looks like. And this is important even if you don't care about a story-based TTRPG, because everything that happens in the game retroactively becomes a story of what happened. But before we start this video, I want you to go to the blah blah below, that's the comments, and let me know, how do you plan your campaign when it comes to storytelling or plotting? How do you do it? Maybe you don't do it at all. Let me know. This is a small channel. I don't get many comments, so if you comment below, I'm going to see it, heart it, and probably respond, so let's get a conversation going. Welcome back, everybody. This is GDS. This is going to be about the basics of storytelling in TTRPGs, but I think first we need to understand what is the basics, because you might be an advanced GM and you're thinking to yourself, why do I need to bother with the basics? The basics are the basics not because they are the most simple, but because they are used in the very lowest level of GMing to the very highest level of GMing all throughout. Technically speaking, what is a story to a storyteller? I think stories have three components. The first one is necessary, and the first one is plot. Plot is the facts, the things that happen one after another in the story. Without a plot, things don't happen. And here I think it's important to say two things. One, I often see DMs get very obsessed with the plot to the point where they lose the plot, so to speak. They go online and they post these long posts about their campaign ideas where it's really just a plot, a series of events that follows one another. But like we said, this is just one of three elements of a story, so this alone won't be enough to make a satisfying story. And then the second thing that's important here is that this series of events that you plan from the beginning really has nothing to do with the players or their agency, because it can't, because you've planned it from the very beginning. So to you I say, stop. If you're working on a plot right now, stop and listen to the rest of this video. The next two components of a story are important because they make your plot satisfying and engaging. But before we go on, I think we should, and it's important to say, that plots are not just one big thing. They're usually composed of subplots. Let's take the analogy of me going and getting groceries. I know, riveting. A subplot of it could be the subplot of locking the door and getting in the car, and then driving to the store, and then picking up the groceries. These are all subplots in the general plot of me going and getting groceries. Another example is the events of Star Wars. The rebels are trying to fight the Empire, but a subplot within that is Luke learning how to use the Force. Now, while a story can't exist without a plot, because after all you need a series of events to describe, like we said, it's not satisfying and it's not engaging without narrative or drama. First, let's talk about narrative. Narrative is the second component of a good story, and it's what makes the story feel satisfying. When something happens in the story and you tell yourself, that was awesome, and it feels earned. I'm going to steal this next part from Brandon Sanderson's writing philosophy, and he has free lectures you can watch on YouTube, so if you want to do any more research on this, you're more than welcome to. He breaks down narrative, making a story that's satisfying, into three components: promise, progress, and payoff. Promises are things you set up from the very beginning that will pay off later. Promises can be things like tone, genre, or plot. You promise your readers, players, whatever it is, a certain genre. For example, this will be a western, this will be a sci-fi, or this will be an adventure. You can also promise tone. Is this going to be comedic? Is this going to be dark? Is this going to be whimsical? And you can promise things about the plot, about the facts of events. What will be happening? For example, if we need to travel east and talk to a mysterious expert, then the plot will involve going east and speaking to that expert. And you can make promises on plot archetypes. For example, the archetype of the heist, or the archetype of finding the MacGuffin. The idea about a promise is that you give your readers or your players enough context to understand the emotional or narrative weight of what's happening. And you give them things to look forward to that will pay off in the future. This is what will make things ultimately feel earned, if you promise them in the beginning. And speaking of earned, the way you make your way towards something feeling earned is going from the promise to progress. Progress is where player characters make advancements from the promise towards the payoff. Progress can be in relation to different promises that you made. For example, if this is going to be a dark and mysterious game, progress towards that would be building tension and adding dark elements session by session. If one of your plot archetypes is that this is going to be a heist, progress towards that is going to be maybe getting insider information, getting a map of where the heist is going to be, and recruiting people to your team. And if you have a plot promise that you need to take a piece of jewelry and drop it in a volcano, then progress would be literally making progress along that journey. I want to remind you here that we are using narrative to make your story satisfying. This is the second element of a good story. And here it's important to show progress. Stories where there isn't progress typically feel like nothing is really happening. Progress is important to keep your players hooked because it makes your players feel like they're making progress. When players feel like you're getting them distracted or like they're not making forward progress, or even worse, like they're sliding backwards, they will get frustrated. So it's very important to you to be attuned to progress and make sure that to the promises you make in the beginning of your session, in the beginning of your campaign, you make forward progress on. The last element of the narrative is payoff, the cool things you've been building up to. Ideally, at this stage, you've had a promise, and then you've made progress towards that promise, and here it pays off. Here you give the readers or the players what you promised. Typically, when you write or when you plan things, you will actually start with the payoff. You will start at the end. The reason to do that is because these are the cool things that you want to earn. This is the fantasies you want to evoke. This is the moments you want to happen. And the whole point of this structure is that by the time you get to these big, awesome moments, they feel earned. Something interesting here is that writing is a lot different than GMing, because when you write, there is no problem with knowing the end in the beginning. But when you GM, you don't want to know the end in the beginning because, well, wouldn't that be railroading? I have a video on exactly this topic. How do you make narrative without railroading? Because you have to be able to plan something. It's going to be here or here. I highly recommend you watch it if you're interested. To sum up what we've said so far is good stories have three elements. The first one is necessary, and it's plot, the factual series of events that happen. The second one is narrative, promise, progress, and payoff, and it's what makes things feel earned and satisfying. Before we go on to the third and final element of a good story, I want to give you an example so you see why we need this element. Let's go back to the story of me getting groceries. I know, riveting. We have the plot, the facts of what actually happened, and by itself we can all agree this is rather boring. And then we add narrative on top of it. Say we are making this into a film or a story, and at first we show my grocery list. So we show, hey, there will be a grocery trip. And then maybe somebody's talking about the grocery store, and somebody says how they have really delicious fresh oranges there, and that's set up the example that maybe I'll try the orange and I'll love it, and I'll happen to get it. And so we make those promises, and I make progress towards them by going to the grocery store, looking around, speaking to the orange salesman, who apparently exists. I don't know what kind of grocery stores I go to in the story, but this entire story is actually rather boring. And that's not just because it's mundane, getting groceries, it's because it's missing the third crucial element for a good story: drama. If plot is the series of events that factually happened, and narrative is what makes it feel satisfying and earned, then drama is what makes it engaging. What makes you go, wow, I want to see what happens next. What makes you flip to the next page. We have structures of 3s and 3s here, which is kind of nice because drama has three components. It has objective, urgency, and stakes. Objective is what needs to be done, and in order to be dramatic, it needs to be clear because we need to be able to clearly connect it with the urgency and the stakes. The key to a good objective is using good verbs. Let's say I'm running a heist game and players need to break into the security captain's office and steal the blueprints of the building they are going to enter. Let's say the players don't know they will be finding blueprints specifically, so I will be telling them, investigate the captain's office. The problem with the verb investigate is that it's not clear what it actually concretely means. And so when you lack a good objectives, players will find themselves saying, wait, what are we doing again? The way you take a bad verb like investigate and make it into a good direct verb is by asking yourself, well, why do the players need to investigate? So you're drilling down to the reason they're doing what they're doing. They are investigating to find information that will be helpful in their heist. So instead of saying investigate, I can say find information that will be helpful in your heist. And depending on the situation, we can even take this one more level down and ask ourselves, well, why do they need information on the heist? Because they need to perform the heist. Why do they need to perform the heist? Because, say, they need to get an important magical artifact. Say, the cloak of invisibility. And so our dramatic verb will be steal the cloak of invisibility. I hope you see that find is a lot more dramatic than investigate because find has an inherent object. And then steal is a lot more dramatic than find because not only do you have an inherent object, what are you stealing? You also have an inherent opposition. Who are you stealing from? So drama is what will make your narrative engaging, and the first part of that is an objective, a clear objective. What do the players need to do? And here you need a good verb. Going on to the next component is urgency. Urgency is quite simple. Why do we need to do this right now? Here's an example to illustrate why urgency is important. Imagine the players need to perform this heist to steal this magical artifact so they can save the world. And the players ask, okay, fine, when do we need to do this? And I say, you got some time, you got a few years. And so the players will say, oh, okay, well, we got time. It's all good, let's just take some time, plan it, it will all be chill, we can take a stop by the side, get a burger, it'll be fine. In a game without urgency, players don't feel compelled to actually do the objective now. They could do it whenever, which means they will do it never. You can tell your game or a part of your session doesn't have urgency if players just run around looking at random stuff or take time to loot every single goblin, and the reason for that is because these things are unimportant, but players are risk averse. They want to maximize the chances of things going well and minimize the chances of things going badly. So if they can get the most benefit out of their current situation and there is no time limit, they will. Urgency compels them to be like, there is no time to focus on this small stuff, it doesn't matter, we need to go now. And then intimately related to urgency is the third component of drama, which is stakes. What happens if we succeed, and what happens if we fail? Stakes are also important to motivate the players and make them do something. For example, imagine we have the same heist we were talking about, and we say, hey, this magical item is in transit, and it's only going to be in this building for 2 days, and after that, who knows where it's going to be? And the players say, great, what is this magical item used for, and why do we need it? And I tell them, it's used for making really delicious cupcakes, and you don't really need it, and if it falls into the wrong hands, I guess it's not so bad. This will make players go, what is going on? Why are you telling me about this? So this is why stakes are important. It motivates players or motivate characters if you're writing. These are the 3 elements of drama. Objective, what do we need to do? Urgency, why do we need to do it now? And stakes, what happens if we succeed? And what happens if we fail? Some people, and I have in the past as well, describe drama as tension and resolution. And that's a good way to think about it, perhaps a little more simple than what I have here, but it's essentially the same idea. The tension is that you have the objective, what do we need to do? And you have the stakes, this is what happens if we succeed, and this is what happens if we fail. This is the tension. We need to achieve something. We haven't achieved it yet, and if we don't, something might happen. And that something might be terrible. And at the end of the dramatic structure, you have the release of tension. Either something happens if we succeed, or something happens if we fail. But even if we fail, at least we get the release of tension. So now let's go back to the story of me getting groceries. I know we're getting riveting. We have the plot, I'm going to get groceries, I'm going to get in my car, and so on. And we have narrative. We show some promises, we show progress towards those promises, and then we have the payoff of, I have groceries. This was not engaging because we didn't have drama, so let's see what happens now, live, when we add drama. Let's say that outside there is a winter storm and I am running out of food. And so my objective is get enough food for the winter. The urgency is there is a storm that's going to be here in 1 day, and if I don't get food by then, God knows what's going to happen. So what happens if I succeed? I have some food and I maybe don't die of malnutrition in the winter. What happens if I fail? I might die of malnutrition in the winter. Oh gosh, this is terrible. So the plot, I am going to get groceries. The narrative, maybe we set up the storm. We maybe overhear the news and it's talking about this storm rolling through, a historic storm that's going to shut down the place for, say, like 2 months or something crazy. We talk about the groceries and the fact that I'm going to get groceries. We show a grocery list, and then I have the objective, and I realize I need to get groceries because I need to survive this winter storm. And if I don't get these groceries now, I am going to die. Oh God, this is terrible. So I drive to the grocery store and I grab everything just in time to narrowly avoid the storm. I think it said it's going to come in 2 days. So apparently it's a 2-day grocery trip, which is pretty wild. But I get back and I have my food, the storm rolls over, and I'm safe. This story might still not be riveting because it's just groceries, but at least you can see it's a lot better and it seems to have the anatomy of what makes a good story. And so that is the anatomy of what makes a good story. Plot, the facts of what happened. Narrative, promise, progress, and payoff, which makes the story feel satisfying and earned. And finally, drama, which makes the story engaging, makes you want to flip to the next page, and it has objective, a good verb, urgency, why do we need to do this right now? Objective, by the way, is what do we need to do? And stakes, what happens if we succeed? What happens if we fail? Now, this is all great. These are the basic building blocks of TTRPG storytelling. Next, I want to talk about two things which I think people get confused about that we can use the information we just learned to clarify. The first one of these things is plot hooks, and the second is encounters. Let's start with plot hooks. At least from what I've seen online, it seems to be series of events that happen in someone's campaign that usually have the word noble in it many times. And that's about it. It's just kind of something that happens. Sometimes it's something kind of interesting, and sometimes it's something that makes you go, oh, that's kind of neat. So seriously, look up D&D plot hooks right now in Google and ask yourself, like, what are these really? Other than just kind of like things that happen that make you go, oh, that's surprising or neat or, huh. So I think there is some confusion around plot hooks and around encounters. We'll get to that. But the reason I think we should talk about this is because the way we talk about these elements of TTRPGs tells us a lot about the way we play TTRPGs. So let's try to give here a concise and clear definition for what is a plot hook and why you need it. Well, like we said before, a plot, at least from my definition, and I know people can have different definitions, but the plot is the series of facts or events that actually happen. And like we said before, a plot by itself is not engaging and it's not satisfying. So to me, a plot hook is something that introduces the plot, but hooks the players by means of drama, because that's what makes things engaging. So the first part of the plot hook is the plot, what is happening, and the second part is the hook. Make players care about it, and the way you do that is by introducing drama, an objective with clear verbs, urgency, and stakes. That is what a plot hook is. Now, like we said before, just plot and drama in itself is not enough. You need all three: plot, narrative, and drama. So that is something that plot hook misses that I think you should include in your game. When you introduce a brand new plot and you hook the players in with a dramatic structure, make sure to also make narrative promises. For example, what's going to be the tone of this plot? Is this going to be a comedic plot, a dark plot, or anything like that? What's going to be, maybe this plot is going to be a different genre than the rest of your game? And what will be factually happening in the future of this plot? Do we need to go somewhere crazy or do something crazy? Chances are, yes. So that's what I got to say about plot hooks, what they are and how you should be using them. And the second part here is encounters. When people say encounters, I think they typically mean combat, and it tells us a lot about how people plan sessions, because many people plan sessions as just a list of encounters that happen in order, i.e. just a list of combats that happen in order. And it seems to me that's just a plot for the session. And like we said before, a plot alone is not enough to make a story feel engaging and satisfying. So I think a better way to think about encounters is as sub-stories, where a story contains all the three elements we described, where a session is composed of sub-stories, i.e. encounters, and each campaign is composed of sub-stories, i.e. sessions. So what's the benefit of thinking about it this way? The first one is that encounters are now not just combat. And I know some of you might say, well, in my game, I have combat encounters, and I have social encounters. But I don't think this approach really solves the main problem. Like we just said before, encounters is just a series of facts, and that alone is not enough to make an engaging and satisfying story. So switching a combat fact, like the players will fight X, with a social fact, the players will negotiate with X, does nothing to make it not just a fact. In order to do that, you still need to do the work to add narrative and add drama. And going on to my second point of why you should be doing this, when you do that, when you go beyond just having encounters or having a plot or facts of things that happen in your session will feel like it flows more naturally. And the reason is because, one, everything at the end of the session will feel earned because you've promised it in the beginning and showed progress, and two, the players know exactly what they need to do because they have a clear objective and they feel compelled to do it because of urgency and stakes. The players will be driving the session forward. Being attuned to these things will make a more interesting and smoother game, because every step will feel like progress and the end will feel satisfying. I know this is a long video, but this is everything I have to say on the basics of storytelling in the context of TTRPGs. To sum up, we talked about what is the anatomy of a good story. We talked about plot, a series of facts. We talked about narrative, what makes stories satisfying, and drama, what makes stories engaging. We gave some examples about what does a story look like when it has narrative but not drama, or drama but not narrative. It turns out something is missing. And we talked about plot hooks and encounters and tried to make sense of them using the tools that we just learned. If you like this video, make sure to absolutely slam the like button an odd number of times. I'm going to leave that number up to you. Make sure to subscribe. If you're already subscribed, hit it an even number of times. The subscribe button, that is. And if you're not subscribed, an odd number of times. I will leave that specific number up to you. I can't tell you how much this stuff helps me because I don't know. I don't know how the algorithm works, but I'm sure it helps. We have a Discord. Come join it. We talk about everything we talk about on this channel. That's pretty much it. This is your chance now to skip the ad that is about to play and maybe find a different video. I'm going to put some videos on the screen right now that I think you might enjoy that relate to this one. That is pretty much it. Your time to get to a new video. 3, 2, 1. That is it. Thank you. I'll see you later.